Picture this. You're a demographer poring over decades of birth certificates and intelligence data, searching for patterns that might explain our rapidly changing world. As you trace the lines across your screen, something extraordinary emerges from the numbers. The individuals with the highest test scores, the most years of education, the greatest academic achievements, are consistently having fewer children. This isn't an anomaly in one dataset or a quirk of a particular culture. It's a trend sweeping across every developed nation on Earth. Consider South Korea, one of the world's most educated and technologically advanced societies. Their fertility rate has plummeted to just 0.78 children per woman. That's not just low, it's the lowest ever recorded by any country in human history. Meanwhile, in regions where educational opportunities remain scarce, families continue to grow large and thrive. The contrast is stark and undeniable. What could possibly explain this paradox? Why does intelligence, something we celebrate and cultivate, seem to push people away from one of humanity's most fundamental biological drives? The answer lies in a complex web of psychological, social, and economic factors that Charles Darwin himself predicted over 150 years ago. Multiple groundbreaking studies, including research published in the journal Intelligence, have documented these correlations between higher cognitive ability and lower fertility rates. One massive longitudinal study tracking thousands of people across decades found something remarkable. For every standard deviation increase in childhood intelligence, the likelihood of becoming a parent actually decreased. The relationship held true even when controlling for income, education, and social status. But here's where the story becomes truly fascinating, and this is the crucial point we must explore together. Correlation doesn't equal causation. This pattern isn't some immutable biological law carved in stone. It's emerging from a complex interplay of social, economic, and psychological factors that we can actually understand and potentially influence. Darwin himself grappled with this possibility in his later works. He worried that advanced societies might create conditions where reproductive success becomes disconnected from the traits that benefit civilization. He recognized this as a profound evolutionary challenge that deserves serious consideration, not because intelligence determines human worth, but because it raises fundamental questions about how human societies evolve and sustain themselves. The relationship between intelligence and fertility isn't some simple biological equation where smart genes automatically produce fewer offspring. The primary drivers of declining fertility in developed nations are actually socioeconomic. We're talking about skyrocketing costs of raising children, intense career demands that consume prime reproductive years, urbanization that transforms family structures, widespread access to contraception that makes family planning possible, and completely transforms social expectations about what a fulfilling life should look like. Intelligence correlates with these factors because higher cognitive ability typically leads to extended education, delayed entry into the workforce, and career paths that directly compete with family formation during those crucial reproductive years. When you spend your 20s and early 30s earning advanced degrees and establishing professional credentials, you're naturally delaying the biological window for having children. Have you ever found yourself overthinking a major life decision, weighing every possible outcome until the perfect choice seems impossible? Well, here's where cognitive psychology offers some fascinating insights into this phenomenon. Daniel Kahneman's research on how we think shows that people who engage more in analytical reasoning, often those with higher intelligence, tend to apply rigorous cost-benefit analysis to major life decisions, including having children. When you sit down with a calculator and determine that raising a child costs over $230,000, 0 cents in the United States, factor in the opportunity costs for career advancement, consider the complexity of modern parenting expectations, and analyze the potential risks and challenges, what conclusion might your analytical mind reach? That having children is economically suboptimal, at least in the short term. But the psychology goes much deeper than just money. Several other cognitive and emotional factors are at play, and you might recognize some of these patterns in yourself or people you know. Higher cognitive ability often correlates with increased awareness of risks and potential negative outcomes. More educated individuals tend to have higher anxiety about parenting competence. They're more aware of child development research, more concerned about potential psychological damage, and more likely to delay having children until they feel completely prepared, a standard that may never feel truly achievable. Does this sound familiar? The desire to be the perfect parent before even starting, to have read every book, to have achieved every career milestone, to have saved enough money for every conceivable expense. This perfectionist paralysis can delay family formation indefinitely. There's also what researchers call expanded opportunity awareness. When you're intelligent and educated, you can often envision multiple fulfilling life paths and career possibilities. Having children becomes just one option among many, rather than the default expectation it once was. When you can see dozens of ways to build a meaningful life, choosing parenthood requires a more deliberate decision rather than simply following social convention. Think about previous generations where career options were more limited and social expectations more rigid. For many people, especially women, having children was essentially the only path to social recognition and personal fulfillment. Today, intelligent individuals can become renowned scientists, successful entrepreneurs, influential artists, or world travelers. Parenthood competes with these alternatives in ways it never did before. But here's the key insight that changes everything. These psychological patterns aren't fixed laws of nature. Cultural messaging about parenthood, social support systems, and policy environments all influence how intelligent individuals weigh these decisions. The correlation exists within our current social context, but context can change, and has changed throughout history. Darwin's concern wasn't actually about intelligence itself, but about a broader evolutionary principle that applies to any beneficial trait. What happens when civilization creates conditions where characteristics that benefit society become disconnected from reproductive success? This is the heart of what evolutionary biologists call the selection paradox. Think about it this way. Natural selection operates purely on differential reproduction, regardless of what traits society happens to value. In pre-industrial societies, intelligence was more directly linked to survival and reproduction. Smarter individuals could find food more efficiently, navigate complex social relationships, avoid dangerous situations, and provide more effectively for their offspring. Intelligence translated directly into reproductive advantage, but modern civilization has largely severed this connection. Today, intelligence might help you succeed professionally, accumulate wealth, and gain social status, but it could simultaneously lead to life choices that reduce your reproductive output. You might delay having children to pursue education, choose careers that demand extensive travel or long hours, or simply become so absorbed in intellectual pursuits that family formation takes a back seat. That's the paradox Darwin foresaw. The traits that make civilization possible might, under certain social conditions, become evolutionarily disadvantageous. The very intelligence that builds hospitals, creates art, advances science, and solves social problems might be selected against if intelligent people consistently have fewer children. History offers some intriguing examples of this dynamic, though we need to be careful not to oversimplify complex historical processes. During the later Roman Empire, wealthy and educated families did tend to have fewer children, while less educated populations maintained higher fertility rates. But would anyone seriously blame Rome's decline solely on fertility patterns? Of course not. There were military conquests, economic instability, political corruption, barbarian invasions, and countless other factors that contributed to the empire's transformation. What's more relevant for our discussion is how some societies have successfully navigated similar challenges. France in the 18th century experienced declining birth rates among educated classes, but responded with cultural and policy changes that supported family formation while maintaining intellectual achievement. Some Scandinavian countries today maintain relatively higher fertility rates among educated populations through comprehensive family support policies that we'll explore in detail. But here's what makes humans unique in evolutionary terms and why Darwin's concern, while valid, isn't necessarily catastrophic. We can understand these processes and potentially influence them through conscious choice and cultural innovation. We're not just passive subjects of evolutionary forces, helplessly watching demographic trends unfold. We can identify patterns, analyze their causes, and decide how to respond. The question isn't whether we should panic about intelligent people having fewer children. The question is, what do we want that response to look like? How can we create societies that support both intellectual achievement and family formation? How can we resolve the apparent conflict between cognitive development and reproductive success? While Darwin foresaw the problem with remarkable prescience, recent research reveals that the relationship between intelligence and fertility is far more complex and malleable than even he might have imagined. Just when you think you understand the pattern, fascinating new studies throw compelling curveballs that challenge the entire narrative. A Swedish study of military conscripts found something that completely disrupts the dominant story about intelligence and fertility. When researchers tracked thousands of young men through their military service and into their adult lives, they discovered that higher IQ conscripts were actually 25% more likely to become fathers by age 40. This finding directly contradicts the supposed universal intelligence-fertility trade-off and suggests that social context, not cognitive ability itself, drives reproductive choices. Why does Sweden show this pattern while other countries don't? The answer lies in how Swedish society has fundamentally restructured the economics and logistics of parenthood. Swedish fathers receive 240 days of paid parental leave compared to 0 federally mandated days in the United States. Universal childcare costs just $150.00 per month regardless of family income, while American families often pay more than their mortgage. Flexible work arrangements are legally protected rather than career suicide, and both parents can maintain professional advancement while actively parenting. Cross-national studies reveal that the correlation between intelligence and fertility changes dramatically between countries. In societies with strong family support systems, the correlation sometimes disappears entirely or even reverses. This global variation reinforces that we're dealing with social phenomena, not biological inevitability. The problem isn't intelligence itself, but how different societies structure the relationship between career success and family formation. Have you ever considered how much your environment shaped your own intellectual development? Environmental factors play enormous roles in cognitive development. Nutrition during crucial developmental windows, education quality from early childhood through university, social stimulation and cultural exposure, healthcare access that prevents developmental delays, and family stability that allows for consistent learning. Even if there were slight genetic selection against intelligence, which remains hotly debated among researchers, improvements in these environmental factors could easily counteract any genetic trends. Moreover, intelligence isn't a single monolithic trait. Modern cognitive science recognizes multiple intelligences: analytical reasoning, creative problem-solving, practical intelligence, emotional intelligence, and social intelligence. Most fertility research focuses on analytical intelligence measured by IQ tests, but evolutionary success might depend more on emotional intelligence, social cooperation, adaptability, or other capabilities that traditional intelligence measures don't even capture. And here's something that might fundamentally alter this entire discussion. We're living through unprecedented technological change that could completely transform what kinds of intelligence matter for human flourishing. If artificial intelligence handles many routine analytical tasks, human value might shift toward creativity, emotional insight, social connection, or other capabilities that current intelligence research barely considers. The integration of artificial intelligence into our work and family lives offers concrete solutions to many of the socio-economic pressures driving the intelligence-fertility correlation. Rather than some distant sci-fi transformation, AI tools are already enabling the flexible work arrangements that make parenthood more feasible for knowledge workers. Remote collaboration platforms powered by AI allow parents to maintain career momentum while being present for family life. Smart home systems can handle routine childcare logistics, monitoring sleep patterns, managing schedules, even providing educational activities, reducing the intensive daily management that makes modern parenting so exhausting. Consider how AI tutoring systems could democratize high-quality education, removing the pressure on educated parents to provide constant intellectual stimulation, or how AI-assisted medical monitoring could ease the health anxieties that disproportionately affect well-informed parents. These aren't hypothetical futures, they're emerging realities that could fundamentally ease the work-fall in conflicts that drive reproductive delay among intelligent individuals. Beget we explore solutions, we need to address something directly. Any discussion of intelligence and reproduction risks being misinterpreted or misused for eugenic purposes. The history of such misuse is both tragic and instructive, and we need to be crystal clear about why this research doesn't support those conclusions. Eugenic programs have always been based on pseudoscience, racial prejudice, and coercive policies that violate basic human rights. The research on fertility and intelligence doesn't support eugenic conclusions because intelligence is highly influenced by environment, varies greatly within all populations, represents only one of many valuable human traits, and correlates with fertility through social mechanisms rather than biological inevitability. The appropriate response to demographic trends isn't telling anyone whether they should or shouldn't have children. Instead, we need to create social conditions that support whatever reproductive choices people freely make. If intelligent individuals are having fewer children because of economic pressures, career conflicts, or inadequate support systems, we should address those structural problems, not pressure individuals about their personal choices. The most promising responses to current demographic trends aren't theoretical, they're practical innovations that address the root causes of the intelligence-fertility correlation, and we can see them working in the real world. Countries like France and Sweden have implemented comprehensive family support systems, including generous parental leave, subsidized childcare, flexible work arrangements, and direct financial support for families. These policies appear to reduce the career-family conflict that drives much of the correlation we've been discussing, and we can measure the results. These countries maintain higher fertility rates among educated populations compared to nations with less supportive policies. Academic and professional institutions need to fundamentally restructure how they operate. Instead of demanding total life dedication during prime reproductive years, we should design career paths with flexibility for family formation. Universities could offer career-stage parental support, companies could normalize parent-friendly policies, and research institutions could provide comprehensive childcare and family accommodations. Cultural messaging matters enormously too. If society celebrates parenthood as compatible with intellectual achievement, if we highlight successful parent scholars and parent professionals, if we frame child-rearing as intellectually stimulating rather than career-limiting, reproductive choices might shift accordingly. Think about the messages you received growing up about career success and family life. Were they presented as competing priorities or complementary paths? Policymakers should also reconsider how we structure education and career development. If higher education didn't require such intensive time investment during prime reproductive years, if career advancement offered more diverse pathways, if financial success wasn't so dependent on undivided career focus, the apparent conflict between intelligence and fertility might largely disappear. Perhaps most importantly, should we even assume that maximizing any single trait, including intelligence, should be evolution's or society's primary goal. Human flourishing depends on an incredible diversity of qualities: wisdom, compassion, creativity, resilience, cooperation, and countless other attributes that don't show up on any IQ test. Evolution has no predetermined direction or ultimate goal. It simply reflects what traits get passed on under current conditions. If social conditions change, evolutionary pressures change accordingly. The real question isn't whether intelligent people should have more children. It's whether we want to live in societies where career success and family formation are unnecessarily opposed, where economic pressures discourage thoughtful individuals from having children they might genuinely want, and where social structures make parenting more difficult than it needs to be. Darwin's insight about the potential disconnect between beneficial traits and reproductive success remains relevant, but it's not a predetermined catastrophe. It's an evolutionary challenge that human societies can address through conscious adaptation. The correlation between intelligence and lower fertility emerges from specific social and economic conditions, not biological inevitability. By understanding these conditions, we can work to change them. This conversation is far from over. In fact, the most important voices haven't been heard yet. Yours. What part of this evolutionary paradox do you find most thought-provoking or perhaps even unsettling? Are these demographic trends a ticking time bomb for human progress, or just another temporary detour that nature and society will eventually correct? Have you witnessed this play out in your own circles, that friend with 3 kids who somehow still manages deep philosophical debates? Or perhaps the brilliant colleague who can't imagine fitting children into a life full of intellectual pursuits? What would it take to make both paths more compatible? And why does it feel so challenging? Here's a question that might turn this entire topic on its head. If you could rebuild society from the ground up to nurture both genius and generations, what's the very first thing you'd change, and why haven't we done it yet? These are messy, complicated issues that only become clear when many different minds weigh in together.